Welcome back to WION World is One. You're watching Speed News with me, Vidur Kathuria. Let's get started. US President Donald Trump says a deal is in sight to end the dispute over Greenland. Trump also seemed to back down from his threats to take over Greenland by force and impose tariffs on allies. The softening of tone came after Trump held talks with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte in Davos. The meeting came hours after Trump addressed the World Economic Forum in Davos and demanded immediate talks to discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the US. US President Trump has announced a framework deal for the entire Arctic region after meeting NATO Secretary General Rutte. Trump took to Truth Social and wrote that an agreement had been reached to hold discussions to benefit all NATO nations. In his post, Trump said he will not impose his proposed tariffs against 8 nations. He also indicated that discussions would include his desire for a Golden Dome missile defense system over the region. Later, he told reporters it would also cover critical minerals. Donald Trump says Russian President Vladimir Putin has accepted his invitation to join the Gaza Board of Peace. However, soon after Trump's comments, Putin told the Russian Security Council that the foreign ministry was still studying the proposal and would respond in due course. Trump has explained inviting Russia to the board by saying he wants all nations involved, especially those with powerful leaders. Saudi Arabia and 7 other Muslim-majority countries, including key Gaza mediators, Qatar and Turkey, have said they will join US President Donald Trump's Gaza Board of Peace. The list also includes Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan and the UAE. Riyadh said the group backs President Trump's peace efforts. The joint statement, however, made no mention of payments. Earlier, reports said that invites were sent to dozens of world leaders requesting $1 billion for a permanent seat on the board. US President Donald Trump heaped praise on India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, calling him a fantastic leader and a great friend. Responding to a question on India-US trade, Trump said he had great respect for Prime Minister Modi and that a good deal was coming. The statement has drawn global attention as talks between the two countries remain unfinished. The latest comments come amid ongoing tensions over tariffs and global trade realignments. Demonstrators confronted US Border Patrol and ICE agents in Minneapolis as federal authorities pressed ahead with large-scale immigration enforcement operations. ICE vehicles stopped at a gas station where Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino briefly spoke with reporters. Demonstrators shouted insults at agents, accusing them of criminal behavior, and physically confronted officers as ICE vehicles pulled away. Iranian authorities say 3,117 people have been killed during protests that first erupted in late December. But activists say the actual toll could be many times higher due to a harsh crackdown. Demonstrations and strikes, initially sparked by economic grievances, turned into a mass movement against the clerical leadership that has ruled Iran since the 1979 revolution. The Iranian regime has condemned the protest wave as a terrorist incident characterized by violent riots fueled by the US. Israeli strikes killed at least 3 journalists in Gaza, according to the enclave's civil defense agency. The journalists were identified as Mohammad Salah Kashta, Abdul Rauf Shat and Anas Ghaneim. Their bodies were taken to Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah. The strike reportedly occurred in the Al-Zara neighborhood, southwest of Gaza City, an area where civilian activity is ongoing. According to eyewitnesses, the journalists had been using a drone to capture images of aid distribution by the Egyptian Relief Committee. Hamas condemns Israeli strikes on journalists, calling it a dangerous escalation and violation of the ceasefire agreement. The attack comes amid a fragile US-brokered ceasefire that has largely reduced fighting since it took effect on October 10th. Despite the agreement, both sides report violations. Gaza's health ministry says at least 466 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since the ceasefire began. Israeli military says it struck 4 crossings along the Syria-Lebanon border that were used by Hezbollah to smuggle weapons after earlier launching fresh strikes on the militant group in Lebanon. According to Lebanon's health ministry, 19 people were wounded in the strike in the South Lebanon town of Kanarib, 5 of whom were taken to hospital. The Israeli army said it was striking Hezbollah targets in response to the group's repeated violations of the ceasefire understanding. Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, will soon visit the United States, according to reports. She will be the first sitting Venezuelan president to visit the US in more than a quarter of a century, aside from presidents attending United Nations meetings in New York. The invitation reflects a major shift in relations between Washington and Caracas since US conducted a military operation in Caracas that captured Nicolas Maduro and brought him to the United States to face charges. Relatives of Venezuelan political prisoners held a candlelight vigil outside the Zone 7 detention center in Caracas, also known as the Boleta Detention and Custody Center. They demanded proof of life of their loved ones and their prompt release following the capture of Nicolas Maduro by the US military. The Venezuelan government claims that over 400 political prisoners have been released so far, but rights groups have contested the claim. Days after a deadly train crash killed 43 people in Spain, Transport Minister Oscar Puente has ruled out a human mistake as the reason for the accident. According to the minister, the track involved in the train crash had passed 4 inspections in the last 3 months. Investigators are analyzing the missing chunk of undercarriage to determine why the accident happened. The death toll from a fire at a shopping mall in Pakistan's Karachi has risen to 50. The port city's largest fire in more than a decade broke out late on Saturday and quickly spread through the shopping complex. Famous for its 12,000 family-owned stores selling wedding clothes, toys, crockery and other goods, firefighters said on Wednesday they retrieved up to 25 bodies from the debris. Three Hong Kong activists who organized annual Tiananmen vigils face trial today under the national security law. that could land them in prison for up to 10 years. The trio and the Hong Kong alliance, which organizes the vigil, are charged with incitement to subversion under the security law, with the no jury trial expected to last around 75 days. The Hong Kong alliance was founded in May 1989 to support students holding democracy and anti-corruption rallies in Beijing. Peru's interim president, Jose Jerry, appeared before a congressional oversight committee to address unregistered meetings with two Chinese business owners, clandestine encounters that have triggered a criminal probe and calls for his removal. The crisis is the latest chapter in a prolonged political collapse in a country that has seen 7 presidents since 2016 and is about to hold a general election amid widespread public outcry over a surge in violent crime. Several people are missing after a landslide at a campground in the New Zealand tourist hotspot of Mount Maunganui. New Zealand's Minister for Emergency Management, Mark Mitchell, has confirmed at least one young girl is among those unaccounted for. Rescuers are working to locate survivors and the campsite has been evacuated. Thousands remain without power around the nation as heavy rains and winds sweep across the country's North Island. At least 2 people have died in Greece after torrential rain flooded streets, homes and businesses in Athens and other parts of the country. In the southern Athens suburb of Glyfada, a woman died after being hit by a car that was carried away in flash floods. The southern suburb was one of the worst hit by the floodwaters, burying cars and entering homes. The fire brigade received hundreds of calls to pump water out of flooded buildings in Athens. The rainstorm is expected to move to the eastern part of the country today. Asian markets rebounded strongly, tracking Wall Street gains after US President Donald Trump walked back threats of tariffs on Europe linked to Greenland. South Korea led the rally with the Kospi jumping 1.8% to break above the 5,000 level. Kosdaq added 1.5% despite South Korea reporting a surprise 0.3% quarterly economic contraction and its weakest annual growth since 2020. Japan's Nikkei climbed 1.7% even as December export growth missed expectations. Hong Kong's Hang Seng and China's CSI 300 posted modest gains, while Australia's ASX 200 rose nearly 0.7%. US markets also rallied overnight, with the Dow, S&P 500 and Nasdaq all up more than 1%. Gold prices gained on Wednesday after retreating from record highs as easing geopolitical tensions boosted global risk sentiment. Spot gold slipped back after touching an all-time peak near $4,888 an ounce, last trading modestly higher. Markets reacted after US President Donald Trump walked back threats of tariffs tied to Greenland, saying outlines of a deal had been reached with NATO. That news lifted equities and triggered some profit-taking in precious metals. Despite the pullback, gold remains strongly supported, up 64% in 2025 and already 11% this year. Helped by expectations, the Federal Reserve will keep interest rates on hold. Silver dropped sharply after a record run, while platinum and palladium also eased from recent highs. Oil prices edged higher as markets reacted to easing geopolitical risks after US President Donald Trump backed away from tariff threats tied to Greenland. Brent crude rose slightly to around $65 a barrel. The move follows earlier gains this week, also supported by supply disruptions in Kazakhstan after outages at major oil fields. Trump ruled out using force and signaled a possible deal with Denmark and NATO over Greenland, reducing fears of a US-Europe trade war and supporting the outlook for global oil demand. However, comments that Washington could still act if Iran resumes nuclear activity helped keep prices supported. Gains were capped by rising US crude and gasoline inventories, reinforcing concerns about oversupply in the market. The US dollar strengthened sharply after President Donald Trump stepped back from threats to impose tariffs over Greenland, easing market tensions. The euro slid about 0.33%, while the Swiss franc dropped nearly 0.8% as investors moved out of safe havens. Trump said he had agreed to the outline of a future Greenland deal with NATO and ruled out military action, claiming global markets and sparking a relief rally in stocks, with the S&P 500 up more than 1.5%. The dollar also gained against the yen, which weakened after Japan's prime minister called snap elections and signaled looser fiscal policy. Analysts warn further bond market stress in Japan could push the dollar-yen pair toward levels that may trigger official intervention. Despite the calmer tone, European Union leaders are still set to hold an emergency summit on Trump's earlier tariff threats. A key Republican lawmaker is moving ahead with a committee vote on a bill that would give Congress greater control over US exports of advanced artificial intelligence chips. The proposed AI Overwatch Act, introduced by Florida Republican Brian Mast, seeks to allow congressional committees to review and potentially block licenses for exporting high-end AI chips to China and other adversaries. Under the bill, the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the Senate Banking Committee would get 30 days to scrutinize export approvals for advanced AI hardware. Meta Platforms' new artificial intelligence lab has delivered its first high-profile AI models internally this month. Meta's Chief Technology Officer, Andrew Bosworth, said the models were built by the Meta Super Intelligence Labs team, which was formed last year. Speaking on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Bosworth said the team is less than 6 months into its work and the models show strong promise. Bosworth described the internal AI models as very good, though he did not specify which models had been delivered. India's final preparation ahead of next month's T20 World Cup got off to the perfect start. The world champions defeated New Zealand by 48 runs in the first T20 international of the 5-match series in Nagpur. After being put into bat first, host India posted a formidable total of 238 for 7. Abhishek Sharma scored a blistering 84, while Rinku Singh remained unbeaten with a quick 44 off just 20 balls. New Zealand's run chase never really got going. The visitors kept losing wickets and were unable to build any significant partnerships. They eventually ended their innings at 190 for 7. That's it on this edition of Speed News. News and updates will continue on the other side of this short break. Keep watching WION World is One.